Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. I see lots of smiling faces. How wonderful. How's everybody today? Tell me in the chat with ones or twos. One is good, two is less than perfect. Getting ones. Good, good, good. That's very good. And how is the weather where you are? Tooth pain. Oh, Kathy, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. That hurts. That's not good. Couple of twos. All right, we'll try to make everyone more cheerful today. But you are brave to come to class even when things are not so great. Thank you for studying Sanskrit. If there are 8.5 million people on the planet, how many of them do you think want to study Sanskrit? Maybe only us. So this is good. You are very special. You are very wonderful, very brave. Keep coming. So we'll try to have some fun today. Here in Sedona, we are getting rain in the desert for the first time in many months. So we are happy about that, even though it is a gloomy day. Now, let me ask also, I hope that everyone can use the Telegram chat. So if you are having any challenges with that, send us an email, okay? Because we're going to be sharing a lot of information on that chat. And we're working on the homework process too. I think a lot of people did homework 1. Homework 2 is about to come to you. And we're working on the cross-checking process where we will give you homeworks, one homework of someone else to check, and then we will record that. So we'll tell you more about that soon. And also, I want to mention one more thing. I am finding a couple of errors in some of the presentations I'm giving you, small errors like missing a long mark or adding a long mark where there is not supposed to be one. I'm working with many, many different elements. So if you see something that doesn't look correct or you have a question about, please let me know. One of the problems with errors is that if I make an error and give you an error, you may send the error to someone else and they may send it to someone else. So we want to stop that process at the beginning and fix them. So please let me know so we can make things better as we go along. And I will do my best to speak slowly today. And please, translators, let me know if I'm going too fast. Okay, what does Kathy say? Great. Okay, so the homeworks are coming in the Telegram chats. We'll get the process going. Don't worry too much. All right, let's see. Where are we? So we're going to review last week a little bit. Marina, could I have the next slide after the title? So last week, as you remember, we were writing the vowels in Devanagari. And I hope you have all become at least slightly familiar with the vowels and the consonants in Devanagari. So, as you know, we're learning them, or we have looked at them in standalone form. But when you write Sanskrit, when you write Devanagari, the shapes that we learn in the alphabet change as they are written. And we saw a little bit of that last week. So I think this is what Geshe Michael means by organic Sanskrit. It's how it really looks and how it really works in a text and not in an artificial grammar book where you don't really learn how to engage with the text. We will do that. Now, Sanskrit, being sound based, changes the way it's written depending on how it sounds to the Sanskrit speaker. And I was trying to think of a modern language that did that. And I don't think most modern languages change depending on the sound of whatever is being written there. But if anyone has examples, I'd be happy to hear them. Maybe Finnish. Finnish is a very unusual language. I think it's Ural Altaic or something. It has a relationship with Turkish. So let's see. The vowels are not so much about the letter looking like a certain character, but in the context of the word, where is the shortness, where is the length, and how do we write those different things? All right, I think we're going to. Yes, guna and verde. All right, we did this a little bit last week. Well, we've been doing it now for a while. Which ones, who can tell me, which ones are the simple vowels? And feel free to open your mic and say what they are. I know somebody remembers. Here's a hint. They're the first ones in the alphabet song.
All right. Okay.
So simple vowels are the first 5 vowels, and they are a, I, u,
Recording in progress.
Lir. So they can be both long and short.
Yes, exactly right. And which ones are the guna and virdi vowels? Think of the alphabet song in your mind.
Guna are the next 4 vowels.
Almost right.
So guna is A, O, and virdi are I, Al.
Perfect. So the next 4, which are the last 4 real vowels, are the guna and virdi, and 2 are the guna, E, O, and 2 are the virdi, I, Al. And which do you think, based on what we did last week, are easier to write? Maybe you don't think any of them are easy to write. Which ones is it simpler to make a decision about when you're writing them?
Is that writing them as part of a consonant or writing them by themselves?
As part of a word in context.
Well, the primary sound would be very easy because you wouldn't have to write anything.
Perfect. That's an excellent answer. And of the other simple vowels and the guna virdi, which ones might be considered easier to write? And why? I'm going to suggest an answer. For me, it's easier for me to know how to write the guna and varti because there is no choice involved. With the 5 simple vowels, there's always a choice. Is it long or is it short? And it's written differently if it's a long, simple vowel from when it's a short, simple vowel. So you have to make a decision. And when you are writing Devanagari, you have to think in advance because some parts of the written vowel occur before the consonant. And when I write Devanagari, I often find myself having to scratch it out and start again because I forgot that I needed to make a vowel marker before the consonant. With the guna and vardi, though, you don't have to make that decision. They're more or less always written the same, and there's no choice to make. So just to get in your mind the difference between the simple vowels and the guna vardi in terms of writing them. And Andreas is absolutely correct. The primal sound of Sanskrit, short is not written at all. So it is the easiest of all. Okay, let's try the next, next slide, yeah. So why did I put a word in parentheses underneath the verse? Does that word look familiar to you from anywhere in the Devanagari?
It's on the second line, the second word.
Yes. And what's the difference between what I've written and what's written in the verse?
The feather at the top on the, I think it's an L.
Yes. It's a la. What about the feather?
It's in the wrong position in the verse.
It is. And this is something that's very organic. When you are working with Devanagari verses, you often see issues, problems, because these are often cut and pasted or photographically reproduced versions of ancient texts. Our author, Master Shantideva, wrote, I think, around in the 700s. So that was a long time ago. And verses have come down in different states of quality. Some are good and some are bad. So always be on the lookout for this kind of thing. So let's just recite this verse to refamiliarize ourselves with it. I will say the words first in the first line, and then you'll say them with me. So, Adya me sapalam janma, sulabdo manusho bhavaha. So say that with me, like a call and response. Adya me sapalam janma. Adya me sapalam janma. It's the first half of the first line. Second half is Sulabdo manusho bhavaha. Sulabdo manusho. Sulabdo manusho bhavaha. Great. And the second line, the first half, Adya Buddha Kule Jato. Adya Buddha Kule Jato. Yeah. Buddha kule jahat. Oh,
Oh.
good. And the last bit, Buddha putrosmi sampraptam. Buddha putrosmi sampraptam. Buddha kulo. No, I'm sorry. Buddha putrosmi sampraptam. Good. All right, we'll be working with that a little bit more. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is a review. We did this last week. Short and long . Now, the first word there is adya. The initial character is the but it doesn't have a second standalone downstroke. So we know it is a short . And the second in adya is the implied a short which is not at the initial position of the word. So it's unwritten. And what does this word mean? Does anyone remember? It means today. There it is, right there in the chat. Thank you, Natalie. Now, the second word here, I've written it manusha. Manusha. How many A's, or shall I say how many letters in this word? 2, correct. And how many longs and how many shorts? You can open your mics if you like. There's not that many of us here today. One of each, right. And how do you know that? Amarta. You guys are feeling shy today.
One have 2 bits and now but 1 bit.
The one that doesn't have anything and one has a downstroke. So you know that the first letter, ma, has a downstroke after it. So that's a long . You know that the second letter, n, does not have an sound because it has a different vowel written there, which we'll get to in a minute. And you know that the third consonant, sh, must have a because there's nothing written there. So we become detectives and we understand how things go in this way. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is short and long e. So everybody say e. E. Good. Right. So it's not e, it's e. Now, where is the I in the first word?
It's the feather and the downstroke going to the left.
Exactly. It's that mark in between the and that compound consonant there. And how do we know it's not a long A? Because that first letter is A, right?
On the feather, it goes to the consonant.
Exactly. Yeah? Exactly. Yes. So if it was a long A, it would not have any feather. But here, the feather connects the I exactly to the consonant it's related to. So we know it's not part of the So since there's only two groups of letters, it must be part of the other letter. In here, it's a compound consonant, sm, and it means that it's pronounced a smith. A smith. Everybody say a smith.
A smith.
Not a smee, a smith.
A smith.
Perfect. A smith. Yes. And do you remember seeing this in our verse from the Bodhisattva Charyavatara? Because it didn't look exactly like that. What's the difference between these two words, which is the same word? I'll give you a hint. It's related to, in the second word, that first thing that looks like a Roman S. What is that, Mark?
You're leaving out a vowel because the previous word ended with a vowel.
Yes.
This particular vowel.
We're leaving out which vowel?
The
The This S mark is the avagraha, and we put it in the Devanagari whenever we have to leave out the letter because of what comes before it.
All right. Yeah.
Question? Okay, so does anyone remember what this word means? The word is asme. In the second case, it's just smith because we left the A out in context. But not in context, the whole word is always going to be asme. What does that mean?
to be.
Yes. It's actually the first person singular of be. So it's I am. But we'll get to that too in a moment. So there's your short I. Who remembers what the second word is? I'll tell you because it's
Gita. Gita.
yes, exactly. And is it a long or a short I?
Long.
So
Why do you say that? That's correct.
With the marker on top.
Yes, the marker tells you which consonant it goes to. And since it's to the right of the consonant it's connected to, it's a long E. So this lovely word is Gita. No, it's not. It's Gita. And we can see that the downstroke for the sound after the t sound is a real long because it has no feathers. Great. Next slide. So we just went over this in context. We had this word in our verse. So we had it a week or two ago, but I thought we'd go over this again. This is the word asti, which is the verb to be. And the root, as you see there with the root marker, is us. And the third person singular is asti. So often when we're citing a verb, and that means we're discussing a verb in a grammatical context, as opposed to having the verb in the sentence, we often give two things, and I put them here. We give the root and we give the third person singular. And this helps to eliminate any ambiguity because sometimes a verb is similar to another verb, or it's either active or passive or something. So if you give the root and the third person singular, you can be fairly sure of what verb you're talking about in what context. Okay, so when we list out the different forms of a verb like this, it's called conjugating a verb. Verbal groups are called conjugations. Now, is this idea of the different forms of a verb, is this familiar to people in our group? Have you studied this kind of grammar either in your own language or in another language that you've studied? Tell me in the chat, one, if you're familiar with this, and twos, if you're not. Okay, seems like a number of people are familiar with this kind of conjugation. If anyone has questions, let me know. All right. So in Sanskrit, there's 10 different conjugations, and verbs of the same conjugation share a pattern. Us is a second conjugation verb, but it's extremely irregular, as you can see. And what I mean by this is very few of these 9 words look like they have much of a relationship to each other. Some of them do. Often in a language, the oldest words, the words that people began to use the very first moments they started to speak, are the most irregular in format. So this is very irregular. All Sanskrit verbs have 3 persons, first, second, and third, and 3 numbers, singular, dual, and plural. There are a number of languages that have duals, but not that many. So it's a little bit unusual. And let's read across from the first person to the third, the first person singular, asmi, to the first person plural, smaha. So we would say asmi, I am, svaha, you two are, smaha, you many are, more than 2, you two, more than 2. It's awkward to translate it. Second person, ase, you are, I'm sorry, yeah, you are. Dual is staha, you two are, and plural is sta, you many are. First person is aste, he, she, or it is, staha, they two are, sante, they many are. So it's just an example of a nice verb in Sanskrit, and one that it's nice to be familiar with, because sometimes you get surprised because of the irregularity. Let's have the next slide. We're going to go back to writing the vowels. So we did this last time, the short oo and the long oo. This is pretty simple. The first word is an example of a short oo, manusha. Excuse me, I said that wrong. Manusha. And the second is an example of a long oo, sutra, sutra. And a sutra, of course, is either the line on top of a line of Devanagari, or the words spoken by the Buddha, or a thread that you sew with, can mean many things, but it has a long oo, so it's sutra. Okay, next slide. And we went over these last week as well. Here are the gunas, and this is why I say they're a little easier to write. The A is always written with a feather over the consonant that it goes with. In the first case here, it's may. In the second example, it's kule. And the O is always written in this way. In the word manusho, it's a downstroke after its related consonant with a feather leaning to the left on top. So manusho. And the second word there is putro. These are all words from our text. Okay, next slide. So a note about guna and vritti, we'll review a little. We described them in English words as strengthened and increased. Possibly I reverse those, but generally strengthened and increased are ways of translating guna and vritti. So the grammars describe them this way, but the translation is not exact. So I would prefer us to think of them not as strengthened and increased, but as actually guna and vritti. And the reason for the translations is because it helps us know behind the scenes why they are like this. The two gunas are produced by adding a second simple vowel to the primal sound in each of these four cases. Is the starting point. But for the letter A, the Sanskrit ear believes that it has combined and I to make A. So if you really say I, you get A, at least to the Sanskrit ear. And skipping one, we go to O, which is the second guna. They believe that if you say and oo, you get O. So O. So you have to use your imagination a little bit. For the vritti, it's taking the letter and applying it, including it to a guna. So I, they think sounds like I, and ao sounds like ow. So that's the rationale behind guna and vritti. The word guna is just an everyday word that most often means quality or characteristic. And vritti comes from the root vrd. See, I already made an error. I left the dot out from under the vrd in the root. So I'll have to fix that. If you catch this kind of thing in the PowerPoints or the homeworks or anything, point it out. Let me know so I can fix it. So vritti as a word in general usage usually means growth. So you can see that the translations strengthened and increase are stretching it a little bit. They're grammar meanings for everyday words. Who can tell me what is the correct, if you were going to use a dictionary, what is the correct alphabetical order of these four vowels? We mentioned it last week. I don't know if we remember.
So did we say that the order in the song is incorrect and this order is correct?
Yeah, well, this is the same order as in the song.
Oh, sorry. So the correct order is A, O, I, O.
A, O, I, O. That is alphabetical order. Yes. So if you were looking things up in the dictionary, A would come before O, but O would come before I, and I would come before ow. It is kind of interesting when you start looking words up in the dictionary to understand exactly how this alphabet is working. Okay, wow, you guys know a lot of Sanskrit. Good job. All right, next slide, please. All right, we're going to talk about, we did not get to this. We wrote the gunas last week, but we didn't get to writing the vrti. So next slide. All right, this is I, and that's the first vrti. And I had to go to the Bodhisattva Charyavatara to get a different verse, because our verse has no vrti in it. So here is an example in the top of how vrti is written, how the vrti I is written. And underneath you can see the I asked of that word. And it is janai or janai, saying visarga, which are the two dots, with a non-simple vowel is sometimes a little challenging. But I would pronounce this word janai. All right, so you see the verdi there. You write the two feathers directly above the related consonant, leaning to the left. And what is the consonant that the verdi goes with in this word?
It's with the N.
With the na, correct, right. So you can actually, you have enough Sanskrit to read Janai now. You know the letter Ja, you know there's an implicit sound, you see the letter Na, you now know that those two feathers are the vrti ai, and you know what a visarga is. So you can read that. Next slide, please. All right, here's the ow, and this should not be too surprising. The ow is written with two feathers leaning to the left over a single downstroke. So you already know that to write an O, you use a single downstroke with one feather on top of it. And you know that O and ow are related just the way A and I are related, because you know how their increase is said to happen. So it's not too surprising that in order to write ow, you would have a single downstroke after the consonant with two feathers on that downstroke. So in this case, the word is dukau shadasya, dukau shadasya. And that's a lovely word, meaning mental afflictions, badness. Okay. All right. Next slide. A brief review of Anusvara and Visarga. You already know this. The Anusvara is the M with the dot under it in I asked. And what it does is nasalizes the vowel that comes before it. That's why it's called after sound. Anu is after. Svara, in this case, it has a long although svara, meaning vowel, does not have a long Anusvara, after sound. So it nasalizes the sound of the vowel that comes before it. And it has the potential, as we know from our study of M's and N's, to change the consonant that follows it. So again, you see how much Sanskrit is sound-based and how much how you write it actually reflects how it sounds and how that keeps changing. So every time you write a new sentence, you may write the letters very differently depending on how they sound. Okay, and these written changes are called sandhi, And Sandhi is that method of joining words. And in Anusvara Sandhi, there are only 5 rules. So there are 5 nasals. And you know this rule very well already. In our verse, one of the examples there is sampratam. Sampratam. And the H with the dot under it is the visarga. And it's written with 2 dots after the letter it affects. It affects the vowel with a rough breathing sound, and it's a big factor in Sandhi. There are a large number of grammar rules that we call Visarga Sandhi, and we'll be getting to them. And in our text, a good example is Bhavaha. And next slide, please, and we'll see some more examples. There is how many Anusvara do you see? Did someone say 2? Yes, 2. Very good. And how many Visarga?
1.
Yeah, 1. Bhavaha. Great. All right, we're going to recite this one more time. And now I gave you the ayas, so it'll be easier for you to follow along. So let's all together go through this, paying attention to long and short, one time. So, adya me saphalam shanna sulabdo marusho bhavaha. Adya buddha le trato putro sme sampratam. And it's important to remember, even though you see that avagraha there after putro, don't pronounce the missing So you say putrosme, just what's written there. The mark is only to tell you something is missing. Okay. So I want to mention that at one point in a mixed nuts class, Geshe Michael said that he would give $100 to anyone who memorized this verse and the next one. And I wonder if any of you have the wish to do that, because if anyone, you don't have to commit, but if anyone has interest in possibly memorizing these 2 verses in Sanskrit and reciting them in a mixed nuts class, I will remind Geshe-la that he promised this, and we can prepare to do it. So just, what? Someone,
I'm laughing. Yeah, I'm laughing.
you're laughing or you're promising?
Laughing.
Well, just think about it. I'm not asking for promises now, but as we go through, if anyone wants to memorize the 2 verses and recite them in mixed nuts, let me know and I will prepare the ground. Okay, great. Comments? I hear more laughing.
Yes.
Okay, Andreas, I'll prepare the ground. And you don't have to commit. I won't mention names or anything, but I'll say, Geshe-la, some of the Sanskrit students are interested in memorizing those 2 verses you cited. Is that offer of $100 still good? We'll do this along the way. And I would suggest that if you want to practice this, I think we can set up a study group in Telegram or something. Marina knows the answers to these questions, so that at your leisure during the week in between, you could practice this. So let's think about that. Okay, next slide. All right, now today we're going to wrangle with the translation. Wrangle is a good word for translators. I think it is an American idiom, but it means wrestle or struggle. So when you wrangle with something, you engage very energetically with it, but it's not necessarily an easy work. So I want to just say that, translation is an art. It is not a science. Geshe Michael is an amazing translator. Now, of course, you can go online and get this verse translated by AI, and then you can feel happy it's done. But how much does it reflect the ancient Sanskrit? How much does it give you the nuance of the meaning? Shantideva lived around 700 CE, Common Era, and I would prefer to rely on Geshe Michael's translation. He is a genius of a translator, and he adds poetry and nuance to his choice of words. It's not necessarily a literal translation. And, he has studied this for 50 or more years. He has much experience. He has much Buddhist knowledge. He's seen emptiness directly, and his translations are extraordinary. They're uniquely valuable. And this is why this group of us, is studying Sanskrit, so that we can translate texts, not use AI, not rely on another person's translation, but really understand the text and probably understand the extraordinary beauty of Geshe Michael's translation. So we went over this earlier, and this is what the mixed nuts does. And this is the rough version of the translation as it stands today. When Geshe Michael publishes his and Seiji's version of the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, he will polish this. But right now, it is rough, not perfect, but we can see how the words are going. So let's go through this a little bit. We happen to know, and you can look at the I asked there, that adya in each line means today. So you can see in the English where one line is and where the other one stops, right? But let's go through the first line a little bit. And you can see his artfulness, his artistry in how he translates, because we will do the literal meaning of the words, and you will see that that wouldn't help you too much. So the second word there is may, and this is a dative form of the pronoun I. So the meaning of the dative case, which we'll get to, is two or four. So so far we have adyame, and so we can say today to me, right? Palam sapalam janma. So what is sapalam janma? Well, sa is an unusual word. I think it's a short form of saha, which is a preposition meaning with. But, it means with, together with, along with, accompanied by, something like that. And I think Shantideva probably used it instead of saha, which is more typical, he used a short form sa to make meter, because this is a work written in verse. So we could say, today to me, palam janma. Janma is a word meaning birth, taking birth, and palam is a word meaning fruit. Now, Geshe Michael has translated this as, today my life has meaning. What the words actually say is, today, to me, birth is accompanied by fruit. Right? That's the literal meaning of what we just described. So if you are a translator at our level and you see this happening in the mixed nuts, you might translate it, today, to me, birth is accompanied by fruit. But that doesn't mean a lot, does it? At least it doesn't to me. So look what Geshe Michael did with that. Today, my life, and that uses the to me and the janma, birth. My life, sapalam, is going along with fruit. My life has created fruit. It has come to fruition. And he says, today my life has meaning. And I think that's a brilliant translation. So maybe we have a few minutes now, we can talk about the second half of this verse. Sulabdo manusho bhavaha. Now here you can see that he's playing with how he's going to translate this, because there are way too many words here. He says, only now, my human life, the fact that I was born as a human, only today, it has some importance. So sulabdo is a compound word, and it's comprised of two words. Su is the Sanskrit for good or sweet. And you see that in the word sukha. We know sukha is happiness and dukkha is unhappiness. You see it in the word sukhasana in yoga. It's easy pose. So su is a word meaning good. And labdo is a noun here, meaning the root labd means acquire or obtain. So we can translate this roughly, but literally, as well taken, something that is well acquired, something that has been attained in a good way. So you can see that Geshe is experimenting, translating that maybe as having some importance, right? So sulabdo is reflected in his temporary English translation as it having some importance. And we don't know what his final polished version would be, but we can see how Geshe Michael's mind is playing with the translation here. All right, what about manusho? That is another noun, and it means a human. And bhavaha is also a noun, so there's no verbs here really. It means becoming or being, really. So literally, this phrase could be translated as human becoming well attained. That's all it says. And Geshe is translating it as only now my human life, manusho and bhavaha, having become a human, the fact that I was born as a human, only today, sulabdo. So we get the sense of the literal meaning of the words. And we see the brilliance of his draft translation. So, adya mesa palam janma. Today my life has meaning. I took a human life in a great way today. My human life somehow changed into a su labdo, a well-taken human life. And the English that we're working with is very beautiful. Today, my life has meaning. The fact that I was born as a human today has some importance. Sulabdo. Any questions or comments on that? We have a couple more minutes.
I think it's necessary to have a deep insight in the in the words.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But you see how we, as students of Buddhism, with all the context that brings to us, have an advantage in trying to translate this kind of material, because we know who Master Shantideva is. We know his thinking a little bit, and we know the spirit of what he is trying to say. Andreas.
So if we were to translate something, we'd have to use a dictionary to identify the roots and find the English words for those roots. Is that correct?
I would say yes. And we will, someone in this class asked for vocabulary, and I'm going to give you a short vocabulary list after this slide. But as you memorize vocabulary words, you will begin to get a sense, and we will work on this, as to what the word is, what the root is, and what relations are. So it's really a lifelong journey. But yeah, if you were trying to translate sulabdo, you'd have to figure out, first, you probably want to take it apart. Second, you know what su means because it's a small particle. It's a prefix. And then labdo, what does labd mean? You'd have to find the root and start with that, looking it up. If you looked up sulabdo, you might not find that word. You might have to break it up into su and labd. Does that answer your question?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Anybody else? Comments, thoughts? Maybe it's good to buy the. Well, the root dictionary, Kathy, is going to give you Indo-European, and that won't help you too much. It's interesting. And let's quickly go to the next slide. It's 10 o'clock, and I'll let you go soon. But if you look at the very bottom word there, we'll go over this next week, but akasha. I've given you the Indo-European root. But if you looked up, you see in the second line, the root KES. If you look that up in the root dictionary, it wouldn't help you to understand akasha. So you have to back up to the Sanskrit root, which is kush. See, in the first line, it says kush. And if you looked kush up, you might have a chance of getting akasha. But you could probably look up akasha too in the Sanskrit dictionary and find it. But we're going to go over that more. So if you like, you'll get this PowerPoint. You can begin studying these words. We didn't have time to go over it thoroughly. And next week, we'll try to go through the second line in our verse as well. But look at these words, and we'll talk about them more next week. So thank you for coming today. You should now have 2 homeworks in the Telegram and or email. I'm not sure how they're coming. We're organizing behind the scenes how we're going to cross assign the homeworks, and we'll tell you more about that shortly. In the next week or so, we'll have our first quiz. And if you have any ideas, questions, or input about any of this, anything we're doing, how it's working, what you want to see, something different, something more, just telegram us, okay? I'm very interested to hear what your thoughts are and what you want. So thank you for coming. You're very special people, crazy people studying Sanskrit. Thank you. Come back next week and we'll do more. Okay? Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.